Hey guys, tonight we're setting sail on the wine-splashed waves of ancient myth, where leopards appear in the rigging, dolphins sing in Greek, and one smooth-talking god just can't stand being kidnapped by idiots. You're standing on a rocky shore under the Mediterranean moonlight, the sand still warm beneath your feet. The scent of salt and crushed thyme hangs in the air, and there half in shadow is a boy, or maybe a man, lounging by a weathered amphora, humming something soft and sad. He smells like overripe grapes and incense. He looks too calm. You should probably run, but let's be real, you're not going to survive this anyway. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing who else is awake at these ridiculous hours. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Three your eyes, one to Kudamons. You squint at the figure resting on the rocks. His robes shimmer like they've been stitched from the last streaks of sunset, and his curls are just a little too perfect, like a statue that decided to grow skin. Something about him feels off. Not dangerous exactly, but definitely not ordinary. He doesn't even flinch when a gull screams overhead or when a sudden breeze whips sand across your ankles. Instead, he smiles without showing teeth. You've seen that smile in old mosaics on a 1,000-year-old vase somewhere in a museum basement. That half-drunk, half-divine grin. He offers you a sip from a clay cup. You don't remember seeing it in his hand. The smell hits you first, sweet rich with a bite of something ancient. You pretend to sniff it politely, but the scent floods your head like a fever dream. You can practically hear panpipes in the wind. Historians still argue whether this moment Dionysus, appearing alone on the shore, disguised as a mortal, is purely myth or symbolic of his cult's arrival in new regions. Either way, you're caught in the beginning of something you won't be able to walk away from. You ask him where he's from, but he just laughs and says something like from a place with no walls, which, yeah, is not helpful. You wonder if he's drunk. The thing is, Dionysus is always drunk, but never sloppy. That's part of the terror. He's the god of wine, yes, but also of frenzy, transformation, theater illusion, and punishment that looks like mercy. He's what happens when the party doesn't end, when it can't end. A faint splash draws your eyes to the edge of the rocks. A boat. Small, crooked its hull, patched with driftwood and hope. You squint. It's crewed by men with weather-beaten arms and suspiciously clean teeth. Pirates, clearly. Tyrrhenians, if you remember your myths, right? They row like they've just spotted a prize. You? No, not you. The beautiful boy on the shore. You turn to warn him, but he's already watching them. Not with fear, more like amusement. Like he's waiting to see what they'll do, and maybe hoping they'll do the wrong thing. A wave smacks the prow of the boat, and you hear gruff voices calling out. They pretend to be merchants. They ask if you and your friend need passage. The boy nods gently like he's half asleep. You see one of the pirates whisper, "Noble son. Easy ransom." And then the next thing you know, they're dragging him onto the boat. You're dragged with him, not by force, but because curiosity has you by the wrist. The sea is warm around your ankles as you climb aboard. It smells like rotting nets and stolen citrus. You try to explain to the crew that this is a terrible idea, that this boy is not who he seems. One pirate laughs and calls you a temple rat. Another offers you a dry fig. You're clearly not the first stowaway. They bind Dionysus gently with soft rope, as if they're afraid to bruise his perfect skin. You think for a second maybe he's letting them do it. His eyes flick toward you just once, and there's that smile again, like he's enjoying a private joke that ends with someone screaming. Mainstream historical fact break. By the 6th century BCE, Dionysus had his own cult across the Greek world, often associated with women-led rituals, ecstatic dances, and the breakdown of social norms. His presence in myths usually signaled a challenge to order disruption. He didn't just visit cities, he invaded them spiritually and literally. And here you are, helping him board a pirate ship with the kind of guys who think a crown of ivy means easy mark. The sail creaks overhead. The sky tilts. You're underway. You sit next to the god in disguise, who now seems more like a cat lounging in the sun than a captive. The rope slips off him like it's embarrassed to be involved. The crew doesn't notice. One plays a flute badly. Another chews on olives and talks about how much silver a noble family might pay to get their precious boy back. You notice the smell again, sweeter now. Not like salt or sweat, like wine-soaked wood and jasmine. And then the deck shifts slightly beneath your feet, just a whisper of movement. You look down. There are vines, tiny green shoots curling from between the planks, soft and glistening. You blink. That can't be right. The flute player doesn't notice. He's halfway through a tune that sounds like it was borrowed from a funeral. Another pirate tries to swat a fly but misses because it's not a fly. It's a bee. No bees. A swarm of them drifting lazily out from the folds of Dionysus's robe. No one else sees them yet. You wonder if you're losing it. Fringe tidbit time. In some lesser-known versions of Dionysian myth, bees are sacred messengers, carriers of divine madness and honeyed truth. Priestesses of Dionysus were sometimes called Melissae or bees. So yeah, if bees are swarming a ship, something big's about to go down. The god tilts his head, his smile widens. A grapevine slithers up the mast like it owns the place. And still the pirates think they're in control. For now, the sea rolls gently beneath the hull, but you can feel the tension start to twist. The pirates are trying to look casual, eating dried fish, sharpening blades, pretending the vines creeping up the rigging aren't really vines. One of them tries to pull a tendril off the sail, but it hisses at him, retracting like a serpent into the shadows. You edge closer to Dionysus. He's reclining on a coil of rope, now humming under his breath. The same song as earlier, low rhythmic, oddly syncopated like drums from far away. He doesn't look scared. He doesn't look human, honestly. One of the pirates, probably the loudest one, claps his hands and announces to no one in particular. By sundown, we'll have a ransom that'll buy us 10 ships. The others cheer, but it's the kind of cheer that feels a bit too forced, like they're trying to outshout their own nervousness. You catch one man glancing sideways at the god boy, who is now feeding invisible grapes to something you swear isn't there. This ship was never seaworthy. Now it's becoming downright unholy. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greek sailors were notoriously superstitious. Offerings to Poseidon before sailing were standard, and strange omens, like sudden plant growth on deck, would often result in immediate course changes or even full-on mutinies. But these guys, they're ignoring every sign like they've got wax stuffed in their souls instead of ears. You're not sure what you expected from pirates. Probably more eye patches and parrots. But the Tyrrhenians are rougher, leaner, and frankly kind of dumb in a dangerous way. They whisper in Etruscan-accented Greek, curse the waves, and argue over whether the boy should be gagged. One suggests just tossing him overboard to avoid divine bad luck. The others laugh. Bad move. You decide not to speak. You know better. The god is waiting. The ship lurches. Not a big lurch, just a nudge like something large is brushing against the hull from below. You hear a hollow thud, then another. One pirate runs to the edge, peers down, and curses. Just driftwood, he mutters. But the driftwood swims away. You catch a glimpse, a curved shape, sleek and glistening. A fin, it disappears. Another one rises in its place, trailing the ship. You're being followed. Historians still argue whether this myth was purely symbolic punishment for hubris, or if it's rooted in seafaring cautionary tales passed around coastal towns. Either way, the next part is the beginning of the end for the crew. The god stretches, and as he does, a cluster of purple grapes sprouts from the mast. Not hanging there, growing. Leaves flutter open. Tendrils bloom. It's beautiful and terrifying all at once. A tiny vineyard is now climbing toward the sails. The pirates can't pretend anymore. They start yelling, grabbing knives, trying to hack at the vines. But every cut seems to make the plant stronger. It bleeds thick red juice that smells disturbingly like wine, and something darker, something older than soil. You back away as the vines begin to thrum, pulsing with rhythm like a heartbeat. Dionysus doesn't move. He just watches them, eyes half-lidded, like he's watching toddlers throw a tantrum. Cut the mast down, one pirate shouts. Another is already halfway up it, hacking at the ropes. But the ropes aren't ropes anymore. They've turned into something alive, coiled and twitching. The man shrieks as he's flung down, landing in a heap by the steering oar. One pirate tries to row, but the oars won't budge. The ocean has stilled around you. It's like the ship is trapped in a bowl of glass. That's when the music starts. Not the pirate's wretched flute. No, this is different. This is flutes and drums and cymbals you can't see. It's everywhere and nowhere at once. It settles into your bones and makes your heart beat sideways. You grip the railing and look around, but there are no instruments. Just air charged with invisible song. Fringe tidbit coming at you, some followers of Dionysus called Menads or Bacchantes would fall into wild musical trances so intense they could tear animals limb from limb with their bare hands. People thought the music made them invincible, even immortal, which is great until you're the one being torn. A pirate begins to scream, not a yell of pain but confusion. He's staring down at the deck, muttering, "My hands, what's happening to my hands?" You step closer. His fingers are curling, twitching, like they're remembering a different shape. His skin is slick. His eyes are wide and wet and silvering. You realize he's shrinking. His limbs collapse inward, joints softening, melting. His nose flattens. His mouth fuses into a beakless grin. And then, plop, he's gone. Over the side. A dolphin. The rest of the crew erupts into chaos. One tries to jump overboard to escape the transformation, but doesn't make it in time. Mid-leap, his legs fuse, his spine bends, and by the time he hits the water, he's just another smooth shadow slipping into the deep. You don't know whether to run, scream, or beg. Dionysus finally stands. He's glowing now, no longer boyish, but enormous. His robe becomes a lion's mane, then feathers, then a robe again. His face is both kind and awful. His voice fills the air like thunder underwater. "I offered them sweetness," he murmurs. "They chose chains." You try to speak, but he silences you with a look. Mainstream scholars mostly agree that the pirates' transformation into dolphins served two purposes in myth: as a punishment, yes, but also as a mercy. Unlike other mythological creatures who were turned into stone or monsters, dolphins were allowed to live free, joyful and forever reminded of the day they disrespected a god. All around the ship now, dolphins leap and play in the water, eager, strange, and wild-eyed. You swear one of them smiles at you before diving beneath the waves. The ship is quiet. Vines cover every inch of the mast. The crew is gone. Only you remain. And Dionysus. He turns to you, still shining, and winks. "You stayed," he says. "Good." You don't answer. You can't. Your tongue is a stone in your mouth, and your thoughts are scrambled like eggs dropped onto a hot temple step. All you can do is stare at the empty deck, the trailing vines, the glittering sea now filled with strangely playful dolphins. Somewhere in your ribs, your heart knocks like it's trying to escape. Dionysus is still glowing, but it's starting to dim. Not like a candle flickering out, more like a sunrise, backing off just enough to let the world breathe again. His robe settles into deep purples and blacks, swirling like storm clouds stitched by hand. His face softens, and he suddenly looks young again. Not boyish. Timeless. Like someone who's seen all your best decisions and all your worst ones and still finds them amusing. You finally manage to croak out a question: "Why dolphins?" He tilts his head and walks toward the edge of the ship. His bare feet don't make a sound on the planks. He leans on the railing, gazing down at the water, where one of the dolphins does a playful spin. "Because they were meant to love the sea," he says. "They just forgot how." You blink. That's not an answer. Or maybe it's the only one you're ever going to get. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greeks held dolphins in high regard, symbols of good luck, music, and even divine protection. Many sailors believed spotting a dolphin meant safe passage. There are records of temples dedicated to dolphins as companions of gods like Apollo and Poseidon. So in a twisted, mythic way, Dionysus didn't curse the pirates. He redirected them. But you still can't shake the image of those terrified men melting into joy-shaped animals, their cries echoing off the wine-soaked wood. You wonder if they still remember who they were. You glance around, realizing the ship is still moving, though no one is steering. The sail is full, even though the wind has gone dead calm. The tiller creaks, lazily nudged now and then by unseen hands or paws or vines. The ship knows where it's going, or maybe Dionysus does. You're not really a prisoner, but you definitely don't feel in control. He turns back to you, brushing a bit of leaf dust from his sleeve. "I suppose you want to know what happens next," he says. You nod because, honestly, what else can you do? He sits cross-legged in front of you like this is a campfire story, and you're both 7 years old. "Let me tell you something they don't teach in temples," he says. "I wasn't always this." He gestures to himself, divine calm, terrifying. "There was a time I didn't know who I was, or what I was. Just a baby tucked away in the thigh of a god." Here we go. Fringe tidbit incoming. According to one myth, Dionysus was born twice. His mother Semele was a mortal who died when Zeus revealed his divine form to her. To save the unborn child, Zeus sewed the fetus into his own thigh until it was ready to be born, thus making Dionysus twice born, a title often used by his followers. Yes, born from a thunder god's thigh. Greek myths do not mess around. He watches your reaction with a twinkle in his eye. Weird, right, but effective. I was born strong, loud, and ready to cause problems. You try to imagine being carried in a thunder god's leg. It sounds both cozy and claustrophobic, like a divine womb with excellent acoustics. I grew up in bits. He continues, swirling his fingers in the air. Sometimes in Thrace, sometimes in Nysa, sometimes nowhere at all. My caretakers changed my names, changed even my shape. I was a goat boy once, did you know that? You didn't. You're not sure you wanted to. But no matter where I went, people feared what I brought. Not war, not plague, joy. They couldn't stand it. Joy that unmakes things. Joy that says forget your duties. Joy that dances with madness. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was a foreign god imported into Greece or an older native deity who was simply rebranded. His cult has elements of both exotic and familiar, wild and structured. His myths are full of contradiction, probably because he is. You ask what any of this has to do with pirates, with dolphins, with you. He shrugs. They took me for a prize, not the first ones, won't be the last. You realize he's not just talking about the pirates anymore. He's talking about kings, priests, philosophers. Anyone who's tried to bottle joy and serve it cold. Anyone who thought they could profit from wildness without paying the cost. They thought I was just another noble, he says. Just another boy in silk. They didn't ask who I really was. You think of all the stories where gods walk among mortals, testing their kindness. The twist is always the same. The ones who welcome the stranger get blessed. The ones who scorn or exploit him, well, plop. You look down at the waves again. A dolphin leaps, spins, lands with a splash. You swear it's laughing. Dionysus stands and stretches the movement, liquid, lazy, lethal. We're almost there, he says. You ask, where's there? He smiles, a place that needs reminding. You squint at the horizon. Land is just visible now, a rugged coastline dotted with olive trees and what might be smoke from hearth fires. A port city, maybe. Somewhere unsuspecting. You swallow. Are you going to punish them too? He looks at you, expression unreadable. I'm going to show them. Then he tilts his head and grins. You're coming with me. The ship glides into the harbor like it belongs there. Though given what's on board, it absolutely does not. You stand near the bow, trying to act casual like you do this sort of thing all the time. Yes, hello, your face says. Nothing weird going on here. Just a god in a toga and a boat full of grapevines. Standard Tuesday. The port comes into sharper view. White stone houses with red tile roofs stacked lazily up a hill like someone spilled a basket of terracotta sugar cubes. A few fishing boats drift nearby their crews, glancing over curiously until they spot Dionysus. Then their eyes widen and they start rowing the other way, fast. The dock workers. They freeze. One drops a crate of olives which bursts and rolls everywhere like marbles at a temple picnic. Another tries to mutter a prayer, but forgets the words halfway through and just makes vague hand gestures like he's shooing a pigeon. You step off the ship behind Dionysus, your feet hitting the wood of the pier with a little more hesitation than you'd like. The vines on the ship are already retracting, curling in on themselves, as if tidying up after a wild party. By the time the last vine slinks below deck, the ship looks normal again, except for the overwhelming smell of red wine. That's definitely still here. Dionysus doesn't wait. He strolls forward like he owns the place, which, to be fair, he probably does. People part around him like wheat before a scythe. You follow, unsure whether you're his assistant, his herald, or just a witness is stuck too deep in someone else's myth. Mainstream historical fact, Dionysus wasn't always worshipped politely. His arrival in a city often sparked riots, theatrical festivals, and frenzied celebrations. The Dionysia in Athens, those giant drama competitions, that was his party. Masks, wine, music, and stories that questioned everything. Authority, morality, even reality. This town, though, it doesn't feel festive. It feels tense. People are peeking out from behind pillars, whispering behind their hands. It's the vibe of a town that's been a little too clean for a little too long. No music, no dancing, no joy. You finally ask him where you are. Somewhere boring, he replies, but not for long. He heads toward the agora, the town square, where a group of stern-faced men in matching robes are gathered like pigeons arguing over a breadcrumb. City officials, you assume. One of them steps forward with the poise of someone who's had exactly zero surprises in his life and deeply resents the one now unfolding in front of him. He speaks. Stranger, state your name and purpose in this city. Dionysus smiles slow and warm. You already know my name. There's a pause. The man's face does something funny. Like his brain is knocking at the door of recognition, but the lock won't turn. He clears his throat. Then state your business. I bring celebration, Dionysus says simply. Laughter, dancing, wine. You can almost hear the collective sphincter of the city clench. Another official leans over and whispers something to the first, too low to hear, but you catch the word cult. That gets your attention. Fringe, tidbit. The worship of Dionysus wasn't always welcome. In Roman times, his cult, the Bacchanalia, was outlawed for a while due to its secret meetings, emotional intensity, and rumors of, let's say, unsupervised behavior. People feared the loss of control, the loosening of social order, which, if you've been paying attention, is kind of the point. The head official scowls. We do not permit such displays here. They distract from duty, from virtue, from reason. Dionysus tilts his head, all innocent curiosity. From living, you mean? The man reddens. From discipline. As silence settles over the square, the kind that makes your eardrums itch. You watch Dionysus slowly lift one hand. Not dramatically, just a lazy little flick of his wrist. And then, it starts with the statues. One by one, the stone figures lining the square. Heroes, gods, philosophers begin to sweat. Not metaphorically. Literal sweat beads down their marble brows. Then their stone eyes shift, blinking once, twice before they smile. A moment later, the statues leap from their pedestals and begin dancing. Yes, dancing. Imagine a 12-foot likeness of Heracles doing a full twirl landing in a perfect squat and then moonwalking, stone moonwalking, across the agora. That's your reality now. The crowd panics. Some scream, some run. Others stare, slack-jawed. One kid claps. The officials. They're frozen. You can almost see their brains short-circuiting behind their judgmental eyebrows. Then the vines arrive. From cracks in the pavement, from the seams of the buildings, from nowhere. Really, they pour into the square like green fire, coiling up columns, threading through balconies, weaving into garlands and wreaths. Some wrap gently around the arms of stunned citizens, not threatening, just inviting. Wine barrels appear from nowhere and pop their corks like party cannons. Flutes and tambourines join in, floating in midair, playing songs you've never heard but somehow know by heart. The air smells like roasted figs, honey, and something even sweeter, freedom. Historians still argue whether scenes like this were literal or metaphorical. Some say Dionysus unleashing joy was a poetic way of describing cultural shifts, letting people escape the rigid roles society forced on them. Others, they swear they saw statues dance and vines sing. Depends who you ask, and how much wine they'd had. One of the city officials makes a break for it, tries to run up the temple steps. A cluster of vines blocks his path, then gently plucks his scrolls from his hand and sets them on fire. He faints. You look at Dionysus. He's watching it all with a glint in his eye and a half smile that could mean anything from, "Isn't this lovely," to, "Now watch what really happens." A girl starts spinning in the square, laughing as rose petals fall from the sky. Where did those come from? An old man tosses away his walking stick and does a backflip. A flute lifts itself into a baby's arms, and the kid starts playing like it's been their job for centuries. The whole city is unraveling in the most beautiful way. Dionysus leans toward you and whispers, "This is what happens when you invite joy." You nod slowly, but something itches at your mind. What if they fight it? He just laughs, deep and warm and echoing. They will, but not for long. You've never seen chaos look so choreographed. It's like joy has a pulse here, and the whole city is dancing to it. The statues are still boogieing. One of them, a stern-faced philosopher, is attempting the worm. Not well, but with surprising commitment for someone carved from stone. The air hums with music you don't recognize yet can't help but sway to. And above it all, Dionysus stands barefoot in the square, looking like a hurricane made of velvet and vines. But not everyone is enjoying this divine pop-up carnival. You spot them lingering on the edge of the crowd, the skeptics, the stone-faced elders, the nervous priests, fingering prayer beads like they're holding on to the last dry branch in a thunderstorm. A few shake their heads violently and storm off. One yells, "This is madness," which, let's face it, is a cliché, even for Greek drama. Dionysus notices. Of course he does. He turns to you and smirks. You see, they always say that. Madness. As if joy and madness were strangers at a party, instead of roommates who share a closet full of fabulous coats. You chuckle, because honestly, he's not wrong. Mainstream historical fact. The ancient Greeks had an entire word for this divine frenzy, mania. But in Dionysian cults, it wasn't something to be feared. It was holy, a state of inspired ecstasy where your soul could escape your body and commune with the divine. Women known as maenads would enter this trance during rituals, often dancing, singing, and according to some stories, ripping animals apart with their bare hands. You know, spiritually. You ask Dionysus, is this what the pirates feared? He tilts his head. They feared losing control. But the truth is they never had it. And that hits you, like a slow wave of wine through your system. The pirates who tried to steal him weren't just greedy, they were afraid. Afraid of change. Afraid of being unmade and remade into something unexpected. Like dolphins. You eye the dancing crowd, and these people, he shrugs, they'll resist. Until it feels better not to. Suddenly, someone screams, not in terror, but from surprise. You turn to see a fountain erupting in the center of the square. But it's not water, it's wine. Thick red and aromatic. It bubbles upwards, spilling over the edges and pooling at people's feet. A few gasp, a few kneel. One man just sticks his head under the flow like it's the best day of his life. A child runs up to you giggling, holding what looks like a fig loaf. She offers you a bite. You take it. It's warm, gooey, and somehow tastes like every happy memory you've ever had on a picnic. Fringe tidbit. Some rural cults of Dionysus believed that bread and wine could carry the god's essence directly. Consuming them wasn't just symbolic, it was a mystical union one, where the god entered your body and for a moment was you. Modern comparisons to communion are not accidental. You chew and swallow feeling warmth spread through your limbs. Not intoxication, this is something gentler, deeper, like being remembered by the universe. You look back at Dionysus. His eyes are closed now, his arms slightly lifted as if listening to a choir only he can hear. What are you doing, you ask? He smiles without opening his eyes, reminding them who they are. You watch the crowd. A woman in a rigid ceremonial robe tears it off in the middle of the square, revealing a riot of colorful scarves beneath. She starts singing a high wordless melody that draws applause and maybe a few confused tears. A pair of old rivals embrace and begin to dance. A dog prances through the madness with a garland of ivy around its neck, like a canine flower girl at a forest wedding. Historians still argue whether these Dionysian frenzies were literal divine possessions or theatrical performances that allowed suppressed emotions to erupt safely. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe the difference doesn't matter when the statues are twerking and the wine is flowing from fountains. And then you see Widiawim. Lurking at the back of the crowd is a man in a dark cloak. He's not moving, not smiling, not dancing, just staring at Dionysus like he's trying to figure out how to put the genie back in the bottle. He holds something shiny, maybe a scroll case, maybe a dagger. You nudge Dionysus. That guy, he doesn't look thrilled. Dionysus peeks one eye open. A believer in borders and silence. That a new political party. Not yet, but give him time. The cloaked man steps forward, raising his voice. You corrupt this city with temptation and spectacle. You turn men into beasts. You expect Dionysus to rage, or laugh, or vanish in a puff of musical notes. But he just turns to the man and says quietly, no, I let them be beasts. With grace. The man hurls something, a small object sharp and fast. A blade, a dart. But before it hits, it stops midair. Vines too fast for your eyes to track, lash out and catch it cradling the weapon like a misbehaving kitten. Then slowly the vines deposit it on the ground. A beetle crawls over it, unimpressed. Dionysus walks toward the man, but not with menace. He walks like he's approaching someone asleep. You want order, he says gently, but order without passion is dust. You want clarity, but without mystery you get nothing but mirrors. The man trembles, steps back, then bolts, vanishing into the alleys beyond the agora. The music never stops. You stand in the center of the city that is no longer a city, watching mortals rediscover something ancient and terrifying: their own hunger for life. Not survival, not security. Living. Messy, ridiculous, wine-stained living. Dionysus walks back to you, hair tousled by invisible breezes. People forget he murmurs. Then they remember. You ask, will this last? He laughs, of course not. And then he winks. But they'll dream about it forever. By the next morning, the town looks like it survived a dream, just barely. The streets are littered with flower petals, broken lyres, overturned wine cups, and what might be a golden sandal hanging from a cypress tree. A goat naps peacefully in the agora's fountain, the wine now replaced by ordinary water, as if the magic knew its moment had passed. You stretch muscles aching from a night of dancing with stranger statues, and at one point a broom that thought it was a partner. The sun rises gently, painting everything in sleepy peach and gold. The city breathes again, heavier now, like it's remembering how. Dionysus, of course, looks completely unbothered. No hangover, no fatigue. Just standing at the edge of the square, like he's deciding whether to burn it all down or plant daisies. He turns to you. Well, they'll talk about that for a few generations. You glance around, think they'll say it actually happened. He smirks. Historians still argue whether any of it ever does. But stories always happen. That's their job. Mainstream historical fact. In Greek mythology, the gods didn't just embody natural forces, they intervened. Dionysus in particular loved walking among mortals, often disguised just to stir things up. His mythology includes countless visits where he tests the hospitality or integrity of cities, kings, and sailors. And when people failed those tests, let's just say dolphins weren't the worst outcome. You follow him down a narrow street, now weaving through stunned townsfolk, sweeping up confetti and bits of pan flute. A few bow to him. Others pretend not to see him at all. One elderly man offers a small fig tart, hands trembling. Dionysus takes it, kisses the man's forehead, and keeps walking. The farther you go, the quieter the city becomes. Until finally at the edge of town, you find a shady olive grove with a dirt path leading out to the coast. And that's when he asks, ever been on a pirate ship? You stop, blink. Are you being poetic or literal? His smile widens. Why not both? Fringe tidbit. According to one version of the myth one often ignored in school books, Dionysus was kidnapped by pirates not once but several times, and in many retellings it wasn't always clear if he let himself be captured just to see what would happen. Some believe the pirate tale isn't about vengeance at all, but performance art, divine improv. As you hike the last ridge overlooking the sea, the wind picks up. The air smells like salt and old stories. Below you see them, a ship anchored in a cove, crew lounging lazily on deck, tossing dice, singing off-key, and completely unaware that their day is about to be profoundly educational. You squint. So, are those the pirates? Dionysus follows your gaze. They're pirates in the way that pastry is a meal. Technically correct, but missing several essentials. You descend the slope together. The sand is hot and soft underfoot. As you near the ship, one of the sailors sees you and waves lazily. Another shouts, "Oi, fresh meat." You pause. That feels rude. They're pirates, Dionysus says with a shrug. It's basically their love language. One crew member swings down and lands in front of you. He's sunburned, missing a few teeth, and looks you up and down like you're a particularly confusing fish. You two look rich, he says. Or weird, or both. Dionysus, ever charming, leans in. Why choose? And just like that, you're surrounded. Not hostile yet, but definitely curious. The pirates eye Dionysus like they've just found a particularly shiny coin stuck to the bottom of a wine barrel. The captain steps forward. He's got a braid down to his chest, a scar over one eye, and an expression that says he's bored and very open to bad decisions. Well now, the captain says, you look like a prize stranger. I'm a gift, Dionysus replies. The pirates laugh. That kind of hearty, mocking laugh that smells like salted pork and arrogance. One slaps another on the back. Another starts tying a rope, already assuming how this is going to go. You whisper to Dionysus, you're not going to warn them. He just chuckles. I am the warning. Mainstream historical fact. Pirates in ancient Greece weren't romanticized Jack Sparrows. They were closer to armed freelancers raiding coastal villages, capturing people to sell as slaves, occasionally getting hired by city-states for dirty work. A ship picking up a lone traveler on a remote beach that was considered easy prey. They haul both of you aboard with no resistance. One tries to pickpocket Dionysus but ends up with a handful of ivy. Another offers you stale bread and warns you not to throw up on the ropes unless you want to get tied to them. As the ship pulls away from shore, you notice something odd. The sails start turning purple. Not fabric. Color. Bleeding slowly from the seams outward like ink in water. Then the wood begins to hum a low vibrating tone that settles into your teeth. The ropes twitch. The oars start rowing themselves. One sailor drops his cup. Did anyone else's flask just grow flowers? Another yelps as his dagger turns into a bunch of grapes. Captain One cries, I think the mast just winked at me. The captain spins toward Dionysus, eyes narrowing. What kind of trick is this? Dionysus steps forward. No lightning, no thunder, just calm authority. You stole something divine. Let's see what you do with it. And then the ship vanishes. Not into thin air, into vine. Within seconds, the mast becomes a tree. The ropes turn into snakes of ivy. The deck transforms into a mossy stage. The pirates stumble, scream, try to jump overboard, but the sea turns into wine for a moment, swallowing their footing with a splash of Merlot. One man tries to swim away and finds himself paddling in circles. Another climbs the rigging only to find himself gently lowered by a giant hand made of leaves. Dionysus raises a hand. The ship stops changing, and so do the pirates. They freeze mid-scream, mid-motion. You blink. Where there were sailors, now there are dolphins. Sleek, silvery gray, blinking with what might be confusion or eternal amusement. They leap from the deck into the wine sea, turn back to water, and vanish beneath the surface with a splash. All except one. The captain. He remains human, but only barely. His skin is already shimmering, his feet melting into flukes. He stares at Dionysus, something between terror and awe flickering across his face. You, Dionysus says softly, wanted to sell joy for coin. Instead, you'll carry it in your skin for the rest of your days. Then he lifts his hand. The captain gives one final startled laugh, then vanishes beneath the waves. You're alone on a ship of vines. Dionysus turns to you, utterly unbothered. You wanted a story, he says. Now you're in the middle of one. You glance at the sea. Are they going to be okay? He smirks. They'll be playful for the first time in their lives. And from far below the waves, you hear it laughter. Dolphin laughter, like wine pouring from a flute. So now you're standing on what used to be a pirate ship, though. Ship is a generous word for the tangle of ivy blossoms and polished driftwood beneath your feet. The ocean rocks gently beneath you, calm now as if the water itself has taken a long exhale after a fit of divine theater. A vine slithers up the former mast, now a flowering tree, and offers you a fig. You don't question it, you just take a bite. It's the juiciest fig you've ever tasted. Also possibly the first one handed to you by a sentient plant. Dionysus strolls toward the ship's leafy edge, arms out like he's balancing on an invisible tightrope. The sea breeze lifts his hair, and for a moment he looks like a painting that got tired of being still. So you say, do the dolphins remember they were pirates? He stretches. They remember enough to feel embarrassed during mating season. You snort. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Greeks didn't just love dolphins, they worshipped them. In many myths, dolphins were sacred creatures seen as helpers of gods, saviors of drowning sailors, and messengers from the deep. Their presence in a story often meant divine approval or punishment with a silver lining. One dolphin pops up beside the boat. You recognize it, it has a familiar scar over one eye. The former pirate captain, now sleek and slick, balancing on his tail like he's in a circus. He lets out a high-pitched chirp and flips backward, spraying the vine ship in salty mist. Dionysus sighs, mock patient. Show off. You sit down beside him, dangling your legs over the side toes, skimming the surface. So why dolphins? You could have turned them into, I don't know, snails, rocks, something less cute. He grins. Oh, but that's the point. They stole what they thought was just a man. I gave them back what they could be. Fringe tidbit. There's a minor cultic tradition that claims dolphins are the ultimate form of spiritual balance. Part joy, part danger. They smile but also bite. They dance but will hunt sharks. In a way, they're perfect symbols for Dionysus himself. Playful chaos wrapped in charm. You lie back on the leafy deck watching the clouds drift overhead. So what was this really all about? Dionysus doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he plucks a grape from a vine curling along the rail and tosses it into the sea. A dolphin surfaces a second later and swallows it whole. Then finally he says it's a lesson. Not for them. For you. You blink. Me. He gestures broadly at the ocean. How many people treat the divine like cargo? Like treasure they can control, sell or keep, even now. Look at how people chase power bottle wonder and fear joy. The pirates weren't villains. They were a very common personality type. Greedy, terrified. You let that sit for a moment. The sea swells softly. A breeze carries the scent of salt and crushed time. Historians still argue whether the pirate transformation story is meant to be moral allegory or pure mythological spectacle. But even skeptics admit the story stuck for a reason. Something about it resonates. Maybe because we all have a little pirate in us, grasping, doubting, trying to capture magic without letting it change us. Dionysus watches the horizon. Mortals always want to take without tasting. They want miracles that obey. But I'm not a god of obedience. I'm a god of yielding, of surrender. You nod slowly. So the punishment was actually liberation. He grins. Exactly. I didn't end them. I gave them a different shape, one they never would have chosen on their own. You raise an eyebrow. That sounds suspiciously like therapy. He laughs. Let's call it nautical rebirth. The vine ship begins to move not from wind or oars, but by pure intention. The ocean parts for it like even the sea knows not to argue with a god in a good mood. You pass a rocky outcrop where nymphs sunbathe and comb their hair with coral combs. One winks at you, another yawns and turns into a misty wave. You're not even surprised anymore. You lean closer to Dionysus. What happens next? Next, he says, we visit a city that tried to outlaw dancing. You choke on a grape. Are they still standing? For now? The dolphins follow the ship like loyal pets or maybe co-conspirators. They leap race each other and once in a while chirp in a pattern that might be sea-swearing. The captain dolphin nudges the side of the ship as if checking whether there's still a brig he can throw someone into. You pat the rail. Not today, buddy. You're a dolphin now. Go do flips or whatever. He obeys with flair and unnecessary triple twist and splash. Show off indeed. Dionysus watches him go. You know I think he'll make peace with it. You smirk. And if not, there's always shark therapy. Another dolphin whistles at that. Probably a laugh. You're not fluent yet. Mainstream historical fact. In some myths, Dionysus is one of the few gods who shows mercy post-punishment. Unlike Zeus, who might zap you just for sneezing wrong, Dionysus's wrath tends to end in transformation. Painful, yes, but with a weird sort of aftercare. It's never just destruction. It's rebirth with flair. You tilt your head back, letting the sea breeze wrap around you like a blanket. You ever get tired of all this? Teaching people the same lesson again and again. Dionysus stares out at the blue. Sometimes, but the story's never exactly the same. People change or don't, and that's part of the fun. You drift into silence for a while. Just the sea, the dolphins, and the rustling of vines. It's peaceful in a way that feels earned, like the ship knows it once carried thieves, and now holds passengers who ask questions instead of taking. Then Dionysus clears his throat. Oh, and one more thing he says. Don't eat those grapes. You sit up fast. Which ones? The ones that look at you. You freeze, glance at the bunch near your elbow. One grape winks. You very calmly scoot 3 feet to the left and say, noted. Dionysus smiles. Welcome to my world. The vine ship glides across the Aegean like it belongs there, which of course it does now. Dolphins trail in its wake, carving cheerful spirals through the waves. You watch one leap out of the water, spin midair, and vanish into a sea foam cloud that somehow smells faintly like honey. You're not even surprised anymore. As the sun slides lazily toward the horizon, the coast of a new city appears ahead. Its whitewashed buildings catch the orange light glowing like sun-bleached bones. The place seems peaceful enough, the stone walls, olive terraces, the usual goat perched dramatically on a rooftop. But Dionysus, leaning on the vine rail, like a man pondering which bakery to obliterate, shakes his head slowly. This one, he murmurs, this one thought they could ban joy. You raise an eyebrow, like actual laws. He nods. No dancing. No music after sundown. No festivals that lasted more than 3 hours. They thought control would keep the madness out. Did it? He gives you that look, the one that says, you sweet summer child. Mainstream historical fact. Several ancient Greek city-states, particularly in more conservative or militarized regions, actively discouraged or even banned certain Dionysian rites. In Sparta, for example, discipline was worshipped like a deity, and the idea of frenzied ecstatic celebrations made their lawmakers squirm. Other cities restricted Bacchic rituals out of fear they could incite rebellion, especially among women and slaves. Your ship pulls into the harbor with a barely perceptible bump. The dock workers stare in stunned silence as a vessel made of flowers and divine smugness ties itself to a post without a crew. A harbor master approaches cautiously. He's got the look of a man who once lost a bet with an eel. What kind of ship is this? A diplomatic envoy, Dionysus, replies, already stepping onto the dock. You follow your feet, instantly grateful for the stone under them. The harbor master stammers something about permits, but Dionysus just waves a hand, and suddenly the man is giggling. Not maliciously, more like he just remembered a very good joke about turnips. You stroll into the city proper. It's quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that screams in capital letters. Even the birds seem to chirp with restraint. You whisper, "Where is everyone?" Inside, Dionysus says, waiting for the sun to go down so they can start pretending. The streets are spotless, a little too spotless. No litter, no music drifting from windows, not even the soft thrum of a lyre. You pass by a tavern with a painted sign reading, Joy Moderation Council Report, Excessiveness. You pause, that's not ominous at all. Fringe tidbit. Some lesser-known accounts describe ancient puritanical groups forming in Dionysian hotspots to enforce appropriate worship. These self-appointed regulators, often dressed in plain cloaks, discouraged dancing unless choreographed, and would sometimes throw offenders in wells for disrupting sacred sobriety. One such sect reportedly tried to rebrand Dionysus as the god of tidy celebrations. It went poorly. As you walk, people peek through shutters. Kids giggle behind alley corners before their caretakers shush them. One elderly woman drops a tambourine into a bush and scurries away. Dionysus frowns. This isn't repression. It's fear wearing a toga. You reach the town square. There's a big bronze statue of someone stern holding a scroll. The inscription reads, "Order is freedom." Dionysus leans forward and whispers to the statue, "Tell that to a grape." Suddenly there's a whistle, a sharp official kind of whistle, and a squad of robed enforcers marches in. They've got scrolls, sticks, and the rigid posture of people who get offended by cloud formations. One steps forward, clipboard in hand. State your name and purpose. I'm Dionysus, says Dionysus. The enforcer does not blink. You'll need to fill out a form if you plan to perform any celebratory behavior. You whisper they're not buying it. Oh, he says they're buying it. They just don't know they're in the return window yet. He steps forward. I brought wine. Another enforcer mutters against Code 3 Delta. He raises a finger, and music. Code 5 Beta, and the urge to dance until you remember your ancestors' middle names. The enforcers begin to sweat. Then, because Dionysus doesn't do slow burns, he claps, and the statue in the square explodes into flower petals. Music erupts from nowhere and everywhere. Not from instruments, but from the ground, the air, the stone. A rhythm pulses irresistible. Your hips move before you give permission. A child nearby begins to twirl in circles. Her parents gasp, caught between horror and nostalgia. Dionysus spins and ivy spirals up every pillar, every post. Wine bursts from the fountains, staining the cobblestones burgundy. A goat appears on a rooftop and tangos. One enforcer tries to shout, but a trumpet sprouts from his mouth and plays a jazzy solo instead. Another trips over a growing vine and lands in a pie that didn't exist a second ago. You twirl beside Dionysus, your feet lifted by forces that care very little for formality. Laughter bubbles from every doorway, drums thunder from the clouds, and the whole city, despite itself, dances. Historians still argue whether these kinds of stories were meant to be warnings, parables, or wish fulfillment. The idea that even the most rigid communities can be overtaken by joy is both terrifying and hopeful. What's clear is that Dionysus doesn't just crash parties, he builds them where there are none. At the center of the square, a giant cake appears. No one knows why. It plays a flute solo. Dionysus turns to you. Think they'll thank me. You dodge a dancing goat. Eventually, maybe. He winks. That's the long game. As night falls, the city glows not from torches, but from within. People sing, laugh, collapse in happy piles. Somewhere, a man hugs a statue and says, You were right, order is great, but this is better. The enforcers, they're all sleeping in a conga line with smiles. You lean against a marble column now covered in sunflowers. What's next? Dionysus grins. A place that thought they could trap me in a bottle. You blink. That's just asking for it. And you both laugh as the music plays on deep into the night and the city remembers what it means to be free. The vine ship returns for you at dawn as if summoned by the rippling hangover sighs of a whole city rediscovering its fun button. Dew glistens on the flower sails and the dolphins, still frolicking loyally in the shallows, whistle a sleepy sea shanty that may or may not be about pickled olives. You stretch, yawn, and step aboard, waving to a crowd of citizens who look like they've simultaneously experienced revelation exhaustion and their first dance battle. Dionysus climbs on, last holding a basket of figs, a tambourine, and one perfectly average garden gnome. You point. What's that? He shrugs. He earned it. Ship pushes off. And just like that, you're back at sea. Today's voyage is calmer. The sky glows a soft blue the waves barely lap. You lie on a cushion of woven petals, letting the rhythm of the ocean and Dionysus's humming lull your thoughts. But the calm doesn't last. Ever hear of the king who tried to bottle me? He asked suddenly. You sit up. That sounds ambitious. Oh, it was. A clever man. Thought he could trap a god in a cask and sell my power by the pint. Mainstream historical fact. The myth of Dionysus being captured by a mortal king appears in several regional variations. In some, the king is named Pentheus, in others, Lycurgus. Often they try to imprison or suppress Dionysian rites, and the punishment is almost always ironic madness, destruction, or being torn apart by their own kin. Which king was it, you ask? Dionysus spins the tambourine once. Does it matter? It's always the same story. A man thinks power means owning something rather than serving it. So he grabs what he doesn't understand and shoves it in a box, and then wonders why it explodes. The ship veers toward a jagged coastline. A fortress rises above black cliffs, sharp towers, barred windows, the architectural equivalent of a grumpy lecture. Even the clouds over it look judgmental. This was his capital, Dionysus says. They called it the Dry Keep. No wine, no laughter, no chaos, just rules, walls and barrels. You walk with him through the town gates. Everything is gray stone and silence. The people glance sideways, hushed, hurried. A child skips by humming only to be shushed by 3 adults in chorus. No birds, no dogs, no vendors yelling about cucumbers. It feels like the world forgot how to live here. A small sign near the palace entrance reads, "Joy must be pre-authorized." You squint. Why does that sound like a bad slogan for a cruise? Fringe tidbit. In some lesser-known Orphic traditions, Dionysus was once lured into a golden chest with a promise of treasure and music. Instead, the chest was sealed, submerged, and guarded by priests for 3 days only, for Dionysus to re-emerge laughing, declaring the chest his new vacation home. The myth was used to mock attempts to domesticate divinity. You enter the palace. Its main hall is grand, but sterile, polished floors, high ceilings, no color except a faded mural of the king defeating a satyr with a scroll. Seated on a tall throne-like stool is the king himself. He's older now, gray-bearded eyes, sunken but alert. His robes are perfect. His expression is not. He stands, "You again." Dionysus bows theatrically. "Your Majesty, I brought a tambourine, and this delightful mortal." You wave awkwardly. "Hi, I'm mostly here for commentary and snacks." The king scowls. "You ruined my city once." Dionysus chuckles. "I loosened it. You're welcome." "You tricked me. I'd answerish near you. You made barrels burst into birds." To be fair, that one was an accident. The king slams his staff. "You cannot just come and be chaos. Order sustains a kingdom. Containment is necessary." Historians still argue whether the myths of Dionysus's imprisonment are allegories for seasonal cycles, his capture symbolizing winter or dormancy, and his escape representing spring's return. Others say it's just another example of mortals trying and failing to cage what's meant to be wild. Dionysus steps closer. "Containment's alive, friend. You don't own control. You only delay consequences." "And what do you call UE?" A reminder. The king's voice wavers. "You wrecked my vineyards. They sang Dionysus." The grapes started rhyming. You blink. "That's impressive." The king points at you. "They recited erotic poetry at my cousin's funeral." Dionysus shrugs. "The grapes have opinions." Silence thickens. Then Dionysus opens the basket of figs. I brought you a gift, he says gently. One bite and you'll taste everything you forgot. The king eyes the figs like they might grow legs. I don't want your madness. Dionysus smiles. It's not madness, it's memory. Your joy's just been locked up so long it forgot what its own voice sounds like. The king falters. He looks out a window where a single child is humming again. Humming, not silenced. For once. Then slowly he sits and eats a fig. What happens next is quiet. No explosions. No vines. No singing barrels. Just the sound of a man realizing his own palace feels like a prison cell with too many chairs. He looks at his hands. I used to dance. Dionysus places a hand on his shoulder. And you will again. Maybe badly. But that's half the point. You whisper. So, this was mercy. Always was. The palace trembles not with ruin but with something lighter. A ripple of color seeps into the walls. The windows breathe, and the scrolls unravel just enough to let in music. Dionysus takes your arm. Come, before the furniture starts singing. As you walk out, you hear the king laugh. Quiet, surprised, and maybe just a little terrified of his own joy. The townspeople gather in the square. Someone strums a lyre. A dog barks. A woman opens a bakery that's been shuttered for years. And you turn to Dionysus, eyebrows raised. Ever think about just opening a consulting business for emotional repression? He grins, too many spreadsheets. The vine ship rocks gently beneath you as it leaves the dry keep behind, drifting into a shimmering haze where sky and sea blur like watercolors left out in the rain. The air tastes faintly of wild mint, and something you swear smells like your childhood summer camp, but with fewer bugs. You lean against the railing, watching the horizon stretch wide and empty until Dionysus clears his throat. Next stop, the island that thought it could trade me. You raise a brow. Trade like swap gods. He nods, tapping the basket of figs balanced on his hip. Or at least barter my favors for gold. Dionysus for sale, they said. Guaranteed to turn your crops magical. Mainstream historical fact. In ancient trade routes, religious artifacts and symbols, especially of popular gods like Dionysus, were indeed exchanged, gifted, or sold between city-states and cultures as tokens of alliance or power. Some legends hint at priests selling blessings or divine relics for coin-blurring lines between faith and commerce. The ship slows as an emerald-green island emerges through the mist dotted with white temples and bustling markets. The scent of spices and roasted figs fills the air. You can hear merchants shouting laughter, mixing with the clatter of hooves and carts. It smells like a festival if you squint hard enough past the veneer of commerce. The island's harbor is a sprawling bazaar where traders from far lands haggle over everything from olive oil to exotic birds. But something feels off. You step ashore and immediately spot the Dionysus Exchange, a gleaming marble building with brass doors engraved with grapevines and coins. A banner reads, "Your wish, our price." You nudge Dionysus. So, what's the catch? He shrugs. Everything has a catch. But these folks think they've got me on the hook. Inside, the air hums with incense and faint laughter, though it's too measured, like a joke told by a tax collector. Behind a counter, a slick merchant eyes you both. Welcome, looking for a touch of divine favor? We have the latest Dionysian elixirs guaranteed to boost your crops, your wine, and your luck and love. You glance at Dionysus. He just smiles. The merchant holds up a small bottle filled with swirling purple liquid. One sip and your life changes. Price a favor to be named later. You mumble sounds like a sitcom plot waiting to happen. Fringe tidbit. Some rare myths tell of priests who bottled the essence of Dionysus in elaborate vials, selling them as potions for eternal youth, irresistible charm, or enhanced winemaking skills. One story claims a merchant accidentally bottled a mischievous satyr, instead resulting in a very wild party and several missing sandals. Dionysus leans forward. So you sell my power in a bottle. The merchant beams. And what's the harm? You get paid and we get magic. Win-win. Dionysus's grin fades. Magic is not a commodity, it's a relationship. You watch as the merchant's confident smile flickers. Well, it's business. Religion and trade have been intertwined for centuries. Historians still argue whether commercializing religious practices diluted their sacred meaning or helped to spread them across cultures. Some say commodification inevitably strips mystery. Others argue it kept traditions alive through evolving times. Dionysus waves a hand. Suddenly the bottles glow faintly, then shatter one by one, releasing tiny swirls of smoke that turn into laughing faces before dissolving. The merchant's face twists from smug to horrified. And that, Dionysus says, is why you don't bottle a god. Outside, the marketplace erupts into spontaneous song and dance. Traders forget their ledgers, children leap over stalls, and a camel starts a surprisingly rhythmic beat by stomping its hooves. You catch a vendor selling roasted chestnuts who's now pirouetting with a crate of figs. You grin. Well, that escalated quickly. Dionysus winks. Sometimes you just have to remind people that joy can't be bought. As night descends, the island glows under strings of lanterns, the sounds of music and laughter weaving through the streets. Even the merchant, now reluctantly tapping a tambourine, can't help but smile. You lean back on the vine ship, watching the island fade into starlight, and think maybe, just maybe, some bargains are better left unmade. The ship cuts through waves that glitter like crushed gems under a sky smeared with twilight hues. You recline against the wooden rail, the salty air brushing your skin like a soft reminder of how little you understand the gods and their dramas. Dionysus fiddles absent-mindedly with his tambourine, a sly smile playing on his lips. Next tale, he says, voice low, is about a crew that thought the sea was theirs to command. You sit up intrigued. Pirates, right? I thought that was the end of the story turning into dolphins. Dionysus nods. But there's more beneath the waves. Mainstream historical fact, pirates in ancient Mediterranean waters were common nuisances, disrupting trade, and often becoming characters of myth and legend. Their encounters with gods, especially Dionysus, symbolize humanity's attempt to confront forces beyond their control. The ship's sails snap in the wind as the coastline curves into view, rocky cliffs dotted with olive groves and a crescent bay cradling a cluster of ships. These vessels are ragged-patched and proudly flying black flags streaked with purple grapevine symbols. You grimace. They look like they've been through more storms than a soap opera. Dionysus chuckles. They have. But these pirates weren't just thieves. They were bold enough to kidnap me. The story unfolds as you walk down the plank and step onto the docks, the salty breeze mingling with the scent of gunpowder and seaweed. According to myth, pirates once captured Dionysus when he appeared as a handsome youth with golden hair and shining eyes. Mistaking him for a wealthy noble, they planned to ransom him. Instead, Dionysus revealed his divine nature, summoning vines that snaked around the ship, intoxicating the pirates. Fringe tidbit. Some fringe scholars suggest this tale encodes a natural phenomenon, ships caught in sudden storms with swirling seaweed and phosphorescent waves. The pirates' transformation into dolphins is seen as a metaphor for the sea reclaiming its own. Dionysus pauses, eyes twinkling. The crew tried to resist, but the vines grew tight. Grapes burst into blooms and wine flowed freely, not the best idea for pirates. You laugh. So basically they got hammered. Literally. Exactly. The sailors' drunken chaos was short-lived. Dionysus transformed them into dolphins to save them from drowning, a mercy that also ensured they'd forever swim the seas, freed from their greedy past. Historians still argue whether the dolphin transformation myth represents a genuine ancient belief in animal metamorphosis or a symbolic narrative about redemption and mercy. You gaze out over the water where dolphins leap and splash, their sleek bodies shimmering like liquid silver. The sight feels almost peaceful, yet tinged with the bittersweet knowledge that these creatures carry a human story of hubris and divine retribution. Do you ever miss being human, you ask? Dionysus smiles softly. Sometimes. But there's freedom in the waves, a song without chains. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky with oranges and purples, you hear the faint echo of laughter, a sound both joyous and mournful. The vine ship sets sail again, carrying you forward through mists that blur the line between reality and dream. The sea breeze cools as night settles, wrapping the vine ship in a gentle hush. You lean over the rail, watching the water's glassy surface catch the moonlight in shards of silver. Dionysus hums a melody so soft it feels like a secret, shared only with the stars. Your eyelids grow heavy, but he interrupts the quiet with a tale that sharpens your senses. Ever hear about the mortal who tried to outwit me? The one who thought he could steal my power without paying the price? You shift intrigued. Another fool, I assume. He grins, the very definition. Mainstream historical fact. The story of King Lycurgus, who tried to suppress the cult of Dionysus, is a well-known myth illustrating the tension between order and chaos. His attempts to banish wine and revelry ended with madness and ruin, typical divine backlash. Dionysus leans closer. Lycurgus thought he could chain the god of wine and madness. He confiscated my vineyards, destroyed my temples, and outlawed my rituals. You raise an eyebrow. That sounds like a great way to earn a headache. The king's story unfolds like a slow-motion disaster. He clamps his fist over grapevines, stomping them into the earth, his face twisted with fury. But the vines have a stubborn way of growing back, whispering promises of liberation and wild nights. Fringe tidbit. Some ancient rituals involve symbolic killing of Dionysus in vine-cutting ceremonies, suggesting a deeper mystery of death and rebirth woven into the wine god's mythos. This might explain why attempts to kill or capture Dionysus never truly succeed. Dionysus chuckles softly. Lycurgus ended up trapped in a maddening illusion, attacking shadows, unable to distinguish friend from foe. Madness became his prison. You shiver, that's unpleasant. It is, but it's a reminder that resistance to joy can imprison the resistor. Historians still argue whether these myths reflect ancient conflicts between agrarian fertility cults and emerging political powers enforcing strict order, or if they symbolize the eternal struggle between freedom and control within human nature. As the ship drifts on, you watch the moon carve silver paths across the waves. The story lingers, a reminder that sometimes fighting the wild heart only chains you tighter. You close your eyes for a moment, the melody of the tambourine blending with the night's gentle rhythm. And when you open them, Dionysus is already pointing toward the next horizon, a place where myth and reality blur even further. The vine ship glides through waters that feel almost liquid velvet, soft and warm beneath your fingertips as you lean on the rail. The air hums with anticipation, as if the ocean itself knows you're about to hear a story that's older than most stars. Dionysus adjusts his wreath, his eyes reflecting the moon's silver glow. This next one is about a town that tried to erase me altogether, he says, voice low but charged. They wanted a world without madness, without wine, without music. You raise an eyebrow. Sounds like a party nobody wants to attend. He nods, exactly. Welcome to the tale of Nyssa. Mainstream historical fact, Nyssa is often cited in ancient texts as the mythical birthplace or upbringing place of Dionysus, a place shrouded in mystery and protected by nymphs and mountains. The town represents both a literal and symbolic cradle of his power. You picture the town, a cluster of whitewashed houses surrounded by towering pines, their needles whispering secrets on the breeze. But instead of joy, you feel a chilling stillness, like a forgotten melody waiting to be remembered. The townsfolk had declared Dionysus an unwelcome shadow, banning his festivals, destroying vineyards and imprisoning anyone caught celebrating. Their leaders wore expressions carved from stone, as if they believed they could freeze time itself. Fringe tidbit. Some scholars speculate that the story of Nyssa encodes early tensions between pre-Hellenic indigenous cults and invading Greeks, reflecting cultural clashes over religious identity and acceptance. Dionysus smiles faintly. They thought they could starve me out. You laugh softly. Good luck with that. The tale turns darker. Without his presence, the town's vines wither, the wells run dry, and the laughter dies in children's throats. The silence is heavy, a slow poison. Historians still debate whether the myth of Nyssa represents an allegory for the loss of spiritual connection due to oppressive social order, or simply a story about the inevitability of change and resilience. One night a stranger arrives, draped in a cloak of leaves, carrying a flute that sings like the wind through the trees. She plays a tune so haunting, so filled with longing, that the townspeople cannot resist. The music awakens the wild heart of the town, and slowly vines creep back, laughter returns, and the festivals begin again. You smile, sensing the lesson. No matter how hard a society tries to suppress joy and chaos, the spirit of Dionysus will find its way back, because it's part of the very fabric of life. As the ship moves away, you feel the warmth of rekindled firelight and the faint echo of flutes in the distance. The night is alive again. The vine ship slips quietly through a fog that tastes faintly of honey and thyme. You draw your cloak tighter, feeling the soft sway beneath your feet, like a lullaby sung by the sea itself. Dionysus watches the horizon with a gleam that suggests the story to come might unsettle you, but in that teasing way only a god can manage. This one's about those who tried to worship me, but, well, got the details all wrong. You grin. Sounds like every online review ever. He laughs, a sound like the clinking of glasses at a lively feast. You'd think worshiping a god of wine and revelry would be simple, but the cult of Dionysus full of surprises and complications. Mainstream historical fact. The Dionysian cult was indeed one of the most ecstatic and mysterious religious movements in ancient Greece, involving secret rites, wild dances, and the blurring of boundaries between human and divine. Their practices influenced later mystery religions and even early theater. You imagine a forest clearing dense with shadows and flickering torchlight. Figures move in frenzy and grace, wearing masks that are both terrifying and beautiful faces of animals, gods, and spirits. Drums pulse like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Fringe tidbit. Some fringe theories suggest that the Dionysian mysteries involve psychoactive plants or substances that induced altered states, though historians still debate whether these claims are myth, metaphor, or reality. Dionysus gestures to the swirling mist. Some worshippers lost themselves entirely, mistaking madness for divine truth. There's a fine line between ecstasy and chaos. You swallow, and that line's not always clear. Exactly. He taps the side of his nose. Historians still argue whether the Dionysian rituals were simply ecstatic celebrations or deeper initiations into cosmic mysteries. You watch a procession of masked figures circling in dance, their feet stirring dust and dreams alike. A young woman steps forward trembling, and suddenly her mask cracks, revealing a face filled with wonder and fear. She's at the edge, Dionysus whispers. The edge of losing herself and finding something else. You realize the story is less about wine or madness and more about transformation, the way the wild forces within us can both terrify and heal. The procession fades, the fire dying down to embers, but the sense of something ancient and powerful remains humming beneath the surface, like an old song you half remember. You sigh, feeling a strange kinship with those seekers who danced on the edge caught between worlds. Dionysus claps his hands softly, ready for the last story. You nod, heart lighter yet full of questions only a night like this can inspire. The vine ship sails into dawn's first blush, the sky a soft palette of pinks and golds that promise new beginnings. You lean back, the gentle rocking, matching the slow beat of your heart, as Dionysus's voice lowers to a soothing murmur, the perfect close to your mythic voyage. This last story, he says, is about the gift I left behind for those who listen and those who dare to dream. You watch the horizon where sea and sky seem to blend into one endless canvas. The air smells of ripe grapes and fresh earth, like the world just waking up from a long, sweet sleep. Mainstream historical fact, Dionysus was not only the god of wine and revelry, but also a symbol of resurrection and eternal cycles celebrated in festivals like the Bacchanalia, which honored the rhythms of life, death, and rebirth. You picture a grove filled with ancient olive trees, their twisted branches reaching like hands toward the sun. Among them, a circle of revelers dances barefoot on mossy ground, faces glowing with joy and reverence. Fringe tidbit. Some mystics believed Dionysus's spirit could inhabit those who partook in his rituals, granting temporary glimpses of divine madness and profound insight, a union between mortal and God. Dionysus's eyes sparkle. I'm not just about chaos or wine, I'm about transformation, about breaking the boundaries that keep you small. You think back to the pirates turned dolphins, the king driven mad, the town silenced and then reborn, all stories of limits tested and transcended. Historians still argue whether Dionysian myths were early expressions of psychological and spiritual states or purely allegorical tales meant to entertain and instruct. You close your eyes, imagining yourself stepping into the circle, feeling the music rise like a tide pulling you toward something greater. The veil thins, and for a moment you sense the wild pulse of the universe within your own heartbeat. Dionysus smiles gently. So when you feel stuck or small or caged, remember the spirit of Dionysus is never far. It's waiting to turn your world upside down in the best way. The sun climbs higher, spilling light like spilled wine over the waves. The vine ship drifts on, carrying you home, with stories etched into your soul. As you settle back, the music fades into a soft hum, the air thick with the scent of possibility. You breathe in deep, the world feeling just a little more magical,